Let's move on to the subject of waste. Maurice Golden.
Thank you, Convener. I refer members to my register of interest with respect to Zero Waste Scotland. The waste sector is a success story in terms of climate change, yet other waste targets, such as the recycling rate target, have not been met. How does the plan for the waste sector seek to deliver on related targets, whether in waste or other sectors?
The briefing I've had from my colleagues in waste and see if that actually gives you a helpful answer to that question. My sense is that what I have in front of me is very much that we're going to continue to work towards our towards a suite of ambitious targets, including, I think, some of the things that you've mentioned of reducing waste by 50% by 2025 and increase recycling, 70% of all waste by 2025, that we're going to be building on our waste regulations, which keep food waste out of landfill, by reducing the amount of food wasted in the first place, and through action to meet our 33% food waste target. So I think those are the key points on that, but I recognise that that's not a full answer to what you've the question you've asked.
So there could be potential conflicts there in terms of synergies between the draft climate change plan and other recycling or waste targets?
No, I don't think that's the case. I think our colleagues in waste have worked, they're aware of their existing targets, and I think they'll have taken that on board. So I don't think there'll be that sort of.
I think Colin may have.
Okay.
So I mean, one of the issues we faced early on in the process was that our modelling potentially identified waste as a potential source of energy, but our colleagues in waste were very quick to point out to us the existing policy framework around waste, so we didn't undercut that agenda.
So how, in terms of your assumptions on that specific point, how does energy from waste fit in with the assumptions you have made for the waste sector going forward?
So we were guided by our colleagues from waste about what we put in terms of diverting waste streams into the modelling. The alternative is waste can look very attractive to these models as a source of energy, but obviously when you're starting to develop more positive uses for some of these waste streams around, for example, the recycling, the whole reuse agenda, you don't want to be cutting off that source of raw material. So the information that was fed into the model took account of those policies.
Confident there won't be a conflict, for example, between energy from waste and the contractual commitments the local authority have made to burn waste and the target set by the Scottish Government to recycle the same waste at a level of 70% by 2025?
That's a level of detail beyond which we're going in the modelling. We're looking at this in a sort of high level, sort of strategic view, and we're taking the policy that waste are giving us going forward and implementing that into the modelling framework. So we won't be breaking any contracts.
Those assumptions, is energy from waste staying the same in Scotland, increasing or decreasing within the assumptions for this draft plan?
I don't have the energy from waste assumptions in front of me. I'm afraid I can certainly add those to the list of things we're writing out with.
Okay, sorry, thanks. And is there any conflict potentially between the food waste reduction targets of 33% and the biorefinery roadmap? Because potentially there's feedstocks there that could be very interesting in terms of processing and a reduction of those self-same feedstocks.
So I don't think there is a conflict, although I can see why you asked that question. But what what we are able to do is to understand how the energy system would cope with that. So that's what Times is very good at now. Whether it can go down to that level of detail, I'm afraid I'm not sure. But what we therefore take from my colleagues in the policy team that look at waste, and indeed the ministers responsible, is a set of assumptions that allow Colin to do the modelling work. So I am confident that in the future we could model, for example, different approaches to those things. And bioenergy is, of course, something that's very well, it's quite underdeveloped as a topic at the moment. So that's something I expect would develop in the future. Our position on that would change, I'm sure.
The committee on climate change has recommended encouraging recycling and separate food waste collections in rural and island communities. What solutions is the Scottish Government considering, and what leadership will be provided to local authorities in those areas who may not have the expertise of major waste collection service changes or commissioning new waste processing plants?
I think the best thing is we write to you with that question, the answer to that question.
Yeah. Yeah,
can I just pick up on this issue about local authorities? Because Table 12.1 talks very clearly about local authorities being partners in delivery. But local authorities face other challenges that may conflict with what we're trying to achieve in this area. So, for example, if you take Angus Council, top performing recycling authority in Scotland, but because of budgetary pressures, it has decided to close some recycling centres, reduce the hours of others, and it's currently withdrawing access to food waste collection in rural areas on the borders of settlements and villages. So what consideration has been given to the fact that local authorities as partners may have other pressures coming to bear that may take them in a different direction to the one we want to go on with this?
So I think at the top level, the idea of partnership with local authorities is the thing that this is built on, and you know, there are various degrees of partnership. I suppose and the policies that you laid out here are at that kind of level. I feel very strongly actually that we need a multiplicity of approaches right across Scotland. I think perhaps 32 would be too many, but at the moment, we have a plan that is very macro, if I can put it that way. And I think the next stage, one of the most exciting things to think about how we manage this, and indeed the energy work that we'll do after the current period of setting strategies, is to understand in much more detail what local plans for those things are, and indeed for the Scottish Government to support those local plans. So when I think of partnership, it's that really. So I would like to assist with the process of planning for a more bespoke energy and climate plan. I think that stops short of a different carbon budget for each locale of Scotland. You'd be free to suggest that, of course, but I can see that would be a very difficult thing to implement. But I do feel that that something very useful for us would be to be in partnership with local authorities to better understand what the plan is in that area, partly as a means for public funding to flow, but also because it acts as a prospectus for private investment when you do that properly. So that's something I'm very keen that we should do after this.
Local authority clusters might be part
Absolutely.
of that.
So I do feel that 32 of those plans is probably too many. I'm happy to be challenged on that, but we certainly should have regional plans, and as best we can put those together, and that does require quite deep partnership working. And I think this sets the framework for that. Is the best way I can describe it.
Okay, thank you very much. Claudia Beeman. Sorry, Maurice Golden, if you want to come in there.
Do you have a point on that, Claudia? No. Just thinking about the kind of macro level policies again, what consideration has been given to potential policies around deposit return or introducing greater producer responsibility within the draft plan?
So again, I'm not an expert in waste unless any of my colleagues know the answer to that question. We'll add that to the list. So apologies that I don't have that detail.
Finally, to wrap this up. Oh, sorry. Maurice Golden, not finally, one more.
Just thinking about jobs this time, and obviously the evidence review makes clear that there's a lack of recent data and certainly Scottish-specific data. I just wondered if you felt that this was a concern and whether there was a plan to commission any studies around this.
I don't think it's a concern, but I do see it as an area for further research. So I think indeed all of the stats I'm aware of around job numbers, for example, in the low carbon economy, are highly speculative. So although I think some of them now are national stats, some of the methodologies for bringing those things together are constantly reviewed. So I do think there's an area there that we could do more on. Colin, do you want to say anything about how we might approach that?
I mean, certainly at the moment, the challenge has been from the main sort of macro level data sets that everything is done on the basis of standard industrial classification, and that tends to be a fairly blunt tool, particularly as the sort of tentacles of the low carbon economy start to reach out into traditional sectors. It becomes much more tricky to actually split out which jobs are or are not low carbon in nature. What we've tended to fall back on that is bespoke surveys, but those bespoke surveys are obviously expensive and we have to run them at quite a large scale in order to get any kind of level of statistical robustness. So that's why the ONS have brought forward the measures they have.
I think it would be helpful if you were looking at this going forward to not just look at the total numbers of jobs, but the types of jobs, where they would be located. And I'm aware that RAP in England has published wider than the waste sector, but a circular economy report looking at both the total number of jobs, where they're likely to be presented, how that reflects on unemployment in some of our most deprived areas in England. And I think it would be useful to publish any reports that you may have on that, and also look at a more detailed study into that.
So let me say now I agree with that. So I think there's always a tendency for us to alight on a single figure for job numbers in something as disparate as a low carbon economy. I don't think that's particularly illustrative of what's happening here. I think that the major reason why I would like to do what you've suggested is I think it really steers future policy development. So we would have a much stronger sense of where the really high value jobs lie in tackling climate change if we can get underneath the skin of the national position.